In this video, I would like to talk with you about ethos, pathos, and logos. These are three terms that were basically coined by Aristoteles, and in his theory of persuasion, these three terms had a very specific meaning. And what I want to do with you here in this video is I want to show you how to become more persuasive by using these three terms. I want to start with you with ethos, and ethos basically had three different kinds of dimensions. The first dimension is competence, the second one is trustworthiness, and the third one is dynamism, which basically means altogether how trustworthy, how competent, and how dynamic is that person. So when you look at these three terms, you're gonna find out one very simple thing, and that is every single great speaker, every single person that you trust has at least one of those three, if not all three. They're competent, they're trustworthy, and or they're dynamic. And the great thing about these three terms is you can learn them. You don't necessarily have to be born dynamic. You don't necessarily have to be born trustworthy. You don't necessarily have to be born competent. You can become competent, you can become trustworthy, and you can become dynamic. So first of all, ethos. Ethos is incredibly important because if we neglect ethos, we neglect the knowledge aspect of persuasion. You cannot be persuasive without being knowledgeable. So that is the first thing that I want you to write down. You have to be knowledgeable. Ethos equals competence, trustworthiness, and dynamism. Alright, so now let's talk about pathos. Now, pathos is actually quite a simple term. It's all about the emotional reasoning. So we now talk a little bit about logical reasoning. So people are competent, people are trustworthy, they're dynamic, and we think, alright, these are people that we can trust because they are persuasive for us. And now we are moving on to pathos, which basically means how much do you trust these people based on emotions. So for instance, you might not like me and I'm absolutely fine with that, or you like me. And there are two different dimensions that we are looking at right now. So liking or not liking. It's basically more like a spectrum and not necessarily two dimensions. So what we're looking at is a positive emotion and a negative emotion. If, for instance, you feel a positive emotion towards a certain person, it's easier to trust that person whether you have a negative emotion. So if people like you, it's much easier then to bring your point across and to seem trustworthy and to seem competent and to seem dynamic. So positive emotions are a key factor to being persuasive. Now let's talk about logos. Logos sounds a little bit like logic, and this is actually where the term logic comes from. The term logos basically means just the not emotional reasoning, but rather the logical reasoning. So for instance, in every kind of purchase decision, when people want to sell you something, there are basically two dimensions again, and that is the logical reasoning and that is the emotional reasoning. So you probably know a lot of products where you're like, okay, I really want that. But there are also a lot of products where you think, I need that. So there's a difference between need and want. Want is often about emotional reasoning, and need is often about the logical reasoning. So for instance, you need water. If not, you're probably going to die after a certain time. You need food because you're going to die after a certain time. For instance, you need to go to work because you need to earn money. And want then is a little bit different. One, for instance, is, oh, this car looks so good. I would love to be able to drive that car. So I think we've all at a certain point in our life looked at a supercar or something, just super expensive, like a villa or some kind of yacht or something like that. And we thought, I would love to be able to sail that boat, that yacht, would love to be able to afford that house or to drive that car. And that is then the emotional reasoning. Now, of course, not every purchase decision is like that. But when we, for instance, look at the advertising industry, they try to be persuasive through two different means, and that is logical reasoning and emotional reasoning. And often they're pushing more the emotional reasoning than the logical reasoning. So we now talked about these three terms in the theory of Aristoteles, and these three terms are again incredibly important because they mark the dimensions that we're going to talk about here in this course. And what I want to do with you in the next videos is actually keep these terms in mind and build upon them. But alright, that was it now here for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope we can see each other in the next one.